6 miles off of the Boeing aircraft runway that was adjacent to an Air Force base, Bacano Air Force Base. And so as a young girl, I would get to see the B-52s climbing slowly up into the air. And both my parents, I have 2 older brothers, and they all have worked for Boeing Aircraft Company. I actually did not want to work at the aircraft factory. Kansas is a nice state, but not terribly scenic. I wanted to see the world. So I couldn't wait until I could get enough money or education or whatever and go out into the world. And at that time, the U.S. Army had a slogan of, join the Army, see the world. This was 1974, and we had signed, the U.S. had signed the Paris Peace Accords. And so we were beginning to pull out of Vietnam, but we were still active there. And my brothers had draft numbers. So we had set up and watched the draft. And my mother never thought in any way, shape, or form that her youngest and only daughter would join the military. She was not thrilled. But when I took the test prior to enlisting for the Air Force and the Army and the Navy, I made high scores on all of those. And so I went to each recruiter to see what they would offer me, which was very unique at the time. I knew it was not going to be a popular choice with my family or most of my friends, but it's an incredible honor to serve your country. And that's what my dad and my stepfather and these Air Force fathers, they just lived it. They didn't just talk about it, but they lived it. And so that was very appealing to me. The recruiter, as I said, they had not had very many women. And this had really opened it up. And so he says, what do you want to do? And it's like, well, I'm not positive what's available. Okay. And he brought me a book that must have been this tall, and he says, those are all the Army careers, pick one. Well, I kept going through the A's, and finally I got to AV, which was aviation, and this took, I'd been there like 2 hours getting through all of these, and I said, I want that one. And he says, well, what is it? And I said, air traffic control. And he says, well, let me see if we got any slots open for you. And so I enlisted for 3 years and a tour in Germany. I spent 4 years and had a tour in South Korea up by the DMZ. Yes, I had absolutely no idea what to expect. The first, I arrived at Fort Jackson, and I had a habit back then of putting my hands in my pockets. And so we were standing there, I had my hands in my pockets, and that gained me the privilege of having overnight duty. Yes. So I didn't sleep for the first 36 hours. When we went out to the gun range, most of the women had not ever had any kind of weapon. And there was a big, burly range sergeant, and he was not thrilled by having a whole group of women to come out. And we had M16s at the time, and I just put that little M6, well, it wasn't little, put that M16 up to my shoulder and aimed it, and at least I hit the target and was willing to do it again. And he came over to me, and a big old burly guy, and he says, where did you learn to shoot? And I said, my uncle worked for Daisy BB Company, and I've shot BB guns. He was not impressed. Not one bit. I was a good controller. But it was it was a very challenging school. They had taken a group of us, of 13 of us, and wanted to see if we could do an accelerated training course. The military was still doing war games, and so I spent that year primarily out in the field doing war games, and I would oftentimes be the only female controller. We did a lot of joint war games, in particular, like at Camp Lejeune, and I would be the only female air traffic controller for a long ways around, and so the pilots had a lot of fun. A lot of teasing. The soldiers, sailors, and Marines that I primarily engaged with, who had either been to Vietnam or who had been drafted, because I was a woman and I was also a volunteer, they were not happy. No. They voiced the fact that they didn't think it was appropriate for women in the military, especially in these new roles that they were rolling out. The other volunteers, the other male volunteers, were much more accepting, but no, not the soldiers who had been in and for a while. So I landed, and they put us on a bus, and the bus was going past these frozen rice paddies. That wasn't very scenic. And I say my prayers saying, I'm a long way from home and nothing looks familiar. And so I say a prayer, and I said, now Lord, just bring me something, that tell me it'll be okay. And so we're all going along in this bus, and I look up, and I don't think I ever saw another one after that. I was there for 2 years. But it was a Coca-Cola billboard in Korean. And I thought, well, shoot, if they got Coca-Cola, I could do this. And that was the answer to my prayer. And, and I thought, oh, yeah, I can do this now. And I used to put in my letters a Korean Coca-Cola bottle cap to my family. It was just kind of a fun message, that I would make it. So we were not accepted at all. American women weren't. So in a way, you didn't spend a lot of time in the village. But you did. We had one TV station, and there is nothing like listening to I Love Lucy in Korean. And so I went through this little village, and as I got closer, the kids would be looking for me, and we would sing and dance and clap as I went across the village. And then I'd go to the quartermaster, and then we'd sing and dance and clap. And so they knew every 2 weeks I'd be coming. And so we did this for 2 years, and they were just delightful. And as I was going to leave country, as they call it, and come back to America, through the translator, I got a message, and it said the village wanted me to come to the village at such and such time on such and such date, which was my usual 2-week, thing. And so I said, okay. And as I got closer, the kids didn't come out to greet me. I thought, well, that's strange. And so I got a little farther up the hill, or if you're from Kansas, it's like a mountain, but farther up the hill, and it was a whole line of the men in the village. And I thought, ooh, what have I done? This might not have been my best idea. But anyway, and they started bowing to me. I mean, this was a significant honor. I must have bowed and bowed and bowed and bowed and bowed and bowed and bowed. And I would have kept bowing until the cows come in. And then the guys parted, and it was the women in the village, and they did the same thing. And I thought, oh, my stars. So, because, to me, I was just one of the soldiers in their country. And then the kids, of course. Then the kids and I were, our usual. Well, so they quieted all the kids, and everybody got quiet. And they had heard that American women like two things, gum and perfume. So they put their money together and bought me a pack of Chanel No. 5 gum. Now, they'd never seen gum. They didn't know they'd never seen perfume. They didn't know what Chanel No. 5. But they had put this together to give me a gift because I had sang and danced and played with the kids. And I was so honored. I was in post, and they came to us one day and they said, mail all your personal belongings home. No explanation, just everything personal, mail back home. So we did, and not long later, I was up controlling one day, and there was a lot. We were busy. We just swamped busy. And I thought, something's going to happen. And so I was blessed because I had access to a number of radios. And it was very, very expensive to call home. You had to make a reservation. You only got to talk for a certain number of minutes, and it was very expensive. So I couldn't call home. I wasn't high ranked. And so anyway, over the radios, I got in touch with a ham operator. And I asked him to give my folks a message. And I said, tell them no matter what they hear, I'm okay. It wasn't long after that the red phone rang. And there was only it was a one-word order. You see, I and my fellow controllers up on that mountaintop were so close to the DMZ that we were not projected to live more than 45 minutes in a conflict. You have to live an hour to have a weapon. So they didn't give us weapons. And the red phone rang, and I answered it, and the one-word order was run. And then I was honored to be one of the air traffic controllers at Fort Eustis, which is the Army Aviation Center, and got to be there. And by that point in time, I had been certified in all types of air traffic control. And there weren't many of us in the world at that point in time that had that certification, and part of it was because Major Dooley let me have opportunities to be able to do that. And so I'm very, very grateful to him. He treated us with respect in a system that didn't have a lot of respect for us at the time. And our mail and news had all been censored during that time. So I didn't have a good idea of what was going on in the U.S. And I landed in Seattle, Tacoma, and I got off the military plane and went to the commercial airline to go home to Wichita. And of course I had to be in uniform. And I walked into the terminal, and I thought, what? People stood up. They called me names I had never, ever heard in my life before. They were enraged, just enraged. And there were these, I think they called them Hare Krishners. They were in these robes, back then. And they surrounded me, encircled me, to help me get to my gate. And if they hadn't, I don't know how I could have got through the crowd. It was really difficult. It was really difficult. Once I got out of the military, I didn't mention it for about 33 more years. I wouldn't tell anybody. I just didn't mention it. I didn't put it on any resume, anything. It was like, no, I'm not going to chance it. When you're in a country like I was, as a young 20-year-old that didn't have those type of opportunities, it kind of changed my perspective, for one thing, but it changed my dedication to this country. Oh, we live in an incredible country. I have fulfilled a promise I made a very young girl in me, that I would see the world and I would have adventures, and the Army kicked that off for me. I mean, if you can go to a country where you know nobody and nothing and everything, you can find your way. You can find your way. And in the military, people do have your back. And I don't think a civilian can quite understand what that means. I don't think I could even put it into words, but it's something sacred.